Hi, my name's Phil, and I like talking about politics. And there was a series of votes on amendments put forward by various MPs today in Parliament in terms of changing the direction for Brexit. Last night, I talked about the fact that an amendment was put forward that Theresa May had said that her government was going to support. And that did pass along with another amendment, but I'll go through that in the sort of running of the day as well in this video, and then try and put some thoughts together as I go through it. Now, first of all, when it comes to voting or deciding how MPs are going to act, one thing that makes it fairly unpredictable is that MPs have the following priorities. They have a loyalty to their constituents' wishes. They have a loyalty to their constituents' best interests, which is not always the same thing. They have a loyalty to their country. They have a loyalty to their local party who select them as candidate and, of course, will be their friends. They have a loyalty to the wider party, the National Party. They have a loyalty to the party leader. They have a loyalty to their own bank balance, and they have a loyalty to their own political power, and they have a loyalty to their place in history. But different MPs put these things in a different order. Some of the things on that list the MP may not value at all. The value of these things can range from 0 to 100%. And because of these different things conflict at the best of times, some of these things will pull in different directions. For example, what's best for your constituents may not be what's best for the country, or what's best for your local party may not be what's best for the National Party. But these are not the best of times, so they're pulling in all sorts of directions. So how an MP acts really is dependent upon the order in which they place those priorities. Now, Theresa May, I may talk about in another video. I'll put some topics up for a poll tomorrow. But basically, in a nutshell, what I would say is she seems to have grabbed any opportunity to waste time with this process. But to what end would be a discussion for another video. But she had told her MPs to back the Brady Amendment. What the Brady Amendment says is, we're going to get rid of the backstop from the deal, at which point it doesn't become a deal anymore because it's no longer accepted by the other side. And we're going to replace it with an alternative method. This is fine, says the EU. No problem at all. Remember, we didn't even want the backstop. The backstop, as it exists in the withdrawal agreement, was the UK's idea. We just want, from their point of view, they just want to make sure that we maintain peace in Ireland. From their point of view, what they need to make sure that the border between the EU and the UK is legal. And they also show in solidarity with the Republic of Ireland and what the Republic of Ireland want. And what we should want as well, quite frankly, is that the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland remains open, because that's how you ensure peace. And people keep saying in the comment, no problem, we'll just reunify it. Right, here's the thing. That you cannot just change the citizenship of a country against the will of its people, all right? Yes, it would be the simplest thing on earth. I always thought growing up there was absolute madness that it wasn't, but I understand the reasons now. It's a bad situation, but there it is. If, let's say, just overnight, because some people seem to fantasize about what everyone else in the country thinks, let's say right now, in the face of this, a majority of the Northern Ireland decided, actually, we now want to unify, in contrast to generations where it's actually been a majority in favour of remaining part of the UK. Let's just say, for the sake of argument. So first of all, they'd have to make that position known to politicians. If everyone just, independently comes to this conclusion, there needs to be some way polls and things like that are conducted before it filters through and politicians start to say, hang on a minute, it looks like there's a majority who would like to reunify here. Then they would have to organise a referendum to be quite sure about this thing. And then you'd need a certain amount of time for both the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom to sort their statute books out to basically transfer citizenship from this one block of line from one country to another. That ain't happening in the next 2 months. It's not happening in the next year, in fact. It would take at least a couple of years for this to happen. And that's just me making stuff up. I know it would take at least that. Okay? And we don't have that sort of time. That's something for the future. Okay? In the future, Sir Graham Brady's daft idea about technology will sort it out might be a thing, but it is not right now. It does not exist anywhere in the world. It is not there. All right. So there is only one way you can satisfy. If we leave the EU, there is only one way you can legally maintain that border between the EU and the UK and make sure that that border is open. And that is that we have a customs union between the EU and the UK. Something that an awful lot of MPs would like, by the way. Now, whether or not it's on the table, a customs union without access to the single market, I would say no. But here's the thing. The EU doesn't want us to crash out without a deal. It hurts them just like it hurts us, but it hurts us more. Because for them, they lose quite a lot of trade with us, and that affects some of their businesses quite badly. We lose all of it. Okay, we're still going to be able to trade, just like they're still going to be able to trade with us and the rest of the world. But we lose a lot of that trade. We lose a lot more because we're a country that will have none of those deals or agreements. But the customs union would ensure that we could stay in it. Now, if the EU's position, which I believe it would be, yeah, you can be in the customs union, no problem, pay a fee for it, and the single market as well. And we look at it and go, no, not the single market, just the customs union. And that's the position that the government comes to. Well, in that case, the EU, if you did play a game of chicken, which is what's basically going to ensue now, there's going to be this massive game of chicken. The EU might be flexible on that. But what a lot of people don't seem to understand, and I mean people, not MPs, the MPs understand this perfectly well, I'll come on to that, is that there is no movement on the border issue because you cannot have a border that is both open and closed. It's that simple. You know, you can't. We cannot express Ireland as a wave function and get into Schrödinger here. You know, the border is open or it is closed. If it is closed, you are in breach of the Good Friday Agreement and you get civil war. If it is open, but we don't have a customs union, then it is illegal. If we've left the EU, it is illegal. We have to have the customs union. So, and it's as simple as that. So, of course, the EU can't shift on this. So why has this amendment been voted through by MPs? There are a variety of reasons. It's actually quite funny. I saw a report from a journalist saying, oh, it actually looks like the Tory party are united. You know, they're voting for this now. It looks like they're united. They were completely split in two on the last vote. Now it looks like they're united. No, they're not. They are still split. They voted for it for different reasons. Okay. Some people are delusional. They voted for it because what they want Theresa May to do now, goodness only knows what she's thinking of doing. I'll go with some options in another video if you like. But what they want her to do is to go to the EU and say, do you know what? Look, we've now passed this deal. The rest of the deal is marvellous. The only thing everyone had an issue with was the backstop. Can you sort out the backstop? And then we're sorted. We're all fine. It's all fine and dandy. Expecting the EU to go, of course. Now, the EU have already said, not a chance. That's not reasonable. But here's what they want Theresa May to do. They want Theresa May to go, there's the deal. I'll just leave it there. I'll be back in a few weeks. And they expect the EU to crack. But here's the thing. Yes, to avoid, because they get problems too. It's not like they can just shed us with no consequences. There may be some wriggle room in terms of favourable conditions with a customs union deal. That's possible. What's not possible is for them to shift on the issue of the border. And it's like I say, it's down to this. If you keep the border open for movement to maintain peace in Ireland, you don't have a customs union, then that border's illegal. The WTO will force them to put people on that border who will then get shot. So the only way is to remain in that customs union. That's it. That is the only solution. Or you close the border and then it's perfectly legal, but then you haven't got peace in Ireland. So obviously, it doesn't matter what the rest of the EU think. And the rest of the EU, by the way, even if they don't have that much sympathy with Ireland, which I think they do, just on that legal trade border issue, cannot make any movement on that. There is no movement to be made. It's not that the backstop has to be in. It doesn't. The EU don't care about the backstop. They just care about the border. If anyone comes up with an actual credible solution for it, they're more than happy to replace it. But here's the thing: if there was a solution, and you notice no one's talking about it, no one's even come out with one. They said solutions as if there's plural. No one has even come out with one of them. Even just one. Well, I'll just throw this out there. It's not one I prefer, but here's a solution. No, not a single one. And do you know why? Because there isn't one. The only solution is a customs union. That is it. There is no other legal framework for having a border between different nations open. They have to be in a customs union. That's quite clear, legally speaking. So, and the other thing is, if they had a solution, I mentioned this last night, if they had a solution, why would they be worrying about the backstop? The backstop doesn't come into force if there's a solution. It doesn't exist. It's there. The backstop is called a backstop. It's there if no solution arises. We don't even have to come up with a solution on the 29th of March. There's a transitionary period with this deal. We could come up with a solution in the next year and a bit or whatever. Doesn't matter. The backstop doesn't come into force until like 2021. All right. There isn't one. And it's not just that there isn't one. They know there's not going to be one. That's why they've got such an issue with it. So there are some people, like I say, delusional. They expect that if Theresa May just sits there going, dum, de-dum, de-dum, right, and the EU will start sweating and cracking. No, they won't. Because although they don't want to go out with no deal, and they are potentially, I only say potentially, if we play it clever, prepared to shift in terms of favourable deals on a customs union, something that they can give. They can't give this. The Republic of Ireland, apart from anything else, will veto it. Nothing that any other EU member state says will stop them vetoing this, because this is a matter of peace or war for them. You know, it's a matter of national security for them. So of course they're going to veto it. And everyone knows that. So that's one motivation. What's another motivation? What about the ERG, all the hardline Brexiteers? They don't want this deal. The worst thing that could happen for the ERG is the EU goes, all right then, yeah, we'll accept this, no problem. And then it goes back to Parliament. If that happened, right, because remember, it's not just a case of the EU agreeing to it and it all goes through. Parliament hasn't voted for the deal yet. Just because it's voted for these amendments, they're not legally binding. The government doesn't have to follow any of them. So what would happen is the EU would, change things in the deal. They'd agree it. Theresa May would bring it back to Parliament in, it's like 2 weeks, something like that, 2 or 3 weeks. Then they vote on it again. Now, let's say it has those changes, so this deal's going to go through. The ERG would vote against it. They would vote it down because they don't want a deal at all. Remember, they need no deal. They're desperately trying to avoid tax avoidance laws. Okay? So why have they done it? What's their motivation for doing it? Twofold. One, the most nefarious purpose for it. Remember what they've been doing? They've been trying to demonise the EU for years, for decades. This is a gift. Because now what they get to do is say the Parliament, the British Parliament, has actually now voted a majority for a deal. It's a very minor majority, but they voted for something. There's a majority finally voted for something the government has wanted them to. It'll go back to the EU. The EU will, well, they've already said it. They said it before the vote even. No, we're not budging. Now they get to say, this is the EU being controlling. They get to carry on demonising the EU. Well, the Parliament said this is fine. They think it's perfectly reasonable. It's the EU being difficult now. They gave us this deal that we would never accept. Of course, they all agreed to that. Now we just changed one little thing, one tiny little thing. And they're throwing a wobbly. They won't accept it. What's their problem? They get to do that. Now that's dreadful. It just worsens these divisions. But the second reason is this. It helps them kill time. They've got 2 months to go before we crash out. The more time that can be wasted, the better for them. They know that Parliament doesn't want no deal. In fact, there was a second amendment that also won by a smaller majority today, and it was one that basically wants the government to rule out no deal. So it's an amendment that basically, and the government can ignore that. Remember, it's not binding, but it does show that there is a majority of Parliament that doesn't want no deal. It doesn't mean to say that the ones who voted against the amendment do want no deal, by the way, but they weren't prepared to vote for the amendment. But nonetheless, the majority said, actually, no, we don't want no deal. But this wastes time. It means a bare minimum of 2 weeks of nothing happening. I mean, MPs will carry on debating things, but there's nothing else of consequence to vote on because Theresa May can spend 2 or 3 weeks trying to renegotiate, run down the clock. So that's why they voted for it as well. All right. And then there was some who just towed the party line. Theresa May told them to vote for it, so they voted for it. And that really explains it. So the party is still split. They just happen to vote for it for completely different reasons. One group want the deal, and they still living in the fantasy world that the EU will crack and give us whatever we want, even though it's not even legally possible for them to give what we want. And the second thing, the second group, know that it's going to come back, but they get to bash the EU some more, and it runs down the clock as well. Win-win for them. So that's the reality of it. The other amendments didn't go through. The main other thing of note today was Jeremy Corbyn. For me, now I'm done with him. He's an absolute disgrace. I said 2 or 3 weeks ago, when it was super clear that the Labour members, an overwhelming majority, want a second referendum. Now, and I said at the time, he said that it's Labour members that decide policy, not the leadership. Here they are giving him a clear message, and it's not like a bit of a majority, you can't be sure. It's a massive message. Don't give me like motions at the party conference. You know, this is clearly, we want a second referendum now. And he hasn't put his weight behind it. He said, I want to exhaust all the possibilities first. Well, I'm telling you what, you've run out of time, because you know what's going to happen. This renegotiation, which will go nowhere, is going to carry on for a few weeks. Theresa May can't negotiate a customs union because that would remove the backstop. If Theresa May says we'll stay in the customs union, and I'm sure the EU would say, okay, customs union and single market. It is possible to negotiate just the customs union. I mean, I would prefer both, but it is possible just to negotiate the customs union. Maybe. I mean, I don't know what they would agree to, but it's possible. That would be at least a fruitful line of inquiry. And that would eliminate the need for the backstop. We don't need the backstop if we're in a customs union permanently. Because that allows for free movement like that. Okay? We'd have still left the EU. You know, that should please the Brexiteers. But at the same time, we can still move goods across and we can still move people. So, yeah, great. But she won't do that because she knows that that wing of her party, the ERG wing, I call it the far right, but it's the ERG wing, more properly known. They know that they don't even want they don't want a deal at all. She knows that. She knows whatever they bring back, they're going to vote against it. Whatever she comes back with is going to be voted down. You know, actually, it would be hilarious if she did negotiate a customs union, because actually that might not be voted down because she might get opposition support then. It'd be quite funny if it's only her own party voting against it. But anyway. So, you know, Jeremy Corbyn, yeah, so he hasn't backed the... And I said he's got a few weeks to do it. After a few weeks, he'll have exhausted... And he has. He's out of time. He's out of time. He needs to push it right now. And he hasn't done. And he's actually potentially missed the boat. I'm not saying there can't be another referendum now, but his time to have tried to push that was before today's voting on these amendments, to swing fully behind that, and he didn't. So he's defied the members now. So he's lied. And the worst thing he did today, and this was absolutely deplorable, is every right to do it technically, but I mean it was described as being against the spirit of the way things are done in the common. It is, but it was particularly deplorable. There was a Labour MP who wanted to ask a question about a second referendum, and Jeremy Corbyn refused to acknowledge her in the House, so she didn't get to ask her question. And this is a thing. It was not only despicable, but it actually, usual thing, at a time where Jeremy Corbyn should be landing fatal blows on the weakened government, he was letting them land blows on him. Tories were jeering at him and you know, pointing out the fact that he was deliberately ignoring one of his own MPs who was bringing an issue that 80% or 78% of Labour members want pushed. The man is no leader. So that was the other thing. I was disgusted with the Prime Minister. I said yesterday, despite everything, I didn't think she would do that. It doesn't prove that she's going for Brexit, though. Because remember, this is just another way to run down the clock. She's just running down the clock. Maybe it's still her plan to run the clock down so far that it then becomes beholden to Parliament to face up to two possibilities. Because at the moment, there's still a range of possibilities. No deal or no Brexit. And maybe she's playing the long game. But it's high stakes and it's very dangerous. Because, you know, it is very, very dangerous. You don't know how Parliament's going to react. And that's, like I said at the beginning, in terms of their priorities, their loyalties, it's... And what I worry about at the moment is you've got a lot of MPs who are, it's like playing poker. They all know they haven't got the strongest hand. So they're basically their strategy is to bluff others and get other people to act in certain ways. And they're making certain assumptions about the reactions of other parties. And if they get those assumptions wrong, it can get very badly out of hand. And that's what a number of European commentators have been saying. They are aware that MPs would not consciously allow a no deal. But the way things are going, it's entirely possible that if they make a misjudgment on how someone's going to react, they end up with no deal because they've run out of time. For example, let's say it genuinely is Theresa May's plan now to just play chicken with the EU and say, I'm willing to sign a deal as long as the backstop is gone. We'll come up with another solution. Trust us on that. But, you know, because we don't want, you know, the hard border in Ireland. We'll come up with something. We've got a year and a bit. We'll come up with something. Don't worry about it. And she sits and waits and the EU say no, no, no. And she's thinking to herself, as soon as it gets right to the last minute, they'll crack. And then it gets right to the last minute and they don't crack. And she'll be there going, ooh, whoops. You know, and that's the potential scenario. I'm not saying I believe it, but that's a realistic scenario. So anyway, you know, that's the events of today. And that's what I sort of think about where we are now. It's very dodgy. There are some issues that I could easily talk about in further detail. I'll put some topic suggestions on the poll. Of course, you should be able to see that for tomorrow's video. Any suggestions, of course, for topics, then, of course, stick that in the comments on the poll as well. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to give it a like, subscribe for further content. Click the bell notification because then you're also notified about the polls. And until next time, I'll see you later.